Hey everybody, it's Anna and welcome back to my booktube channel. If you are one of the oldies, you've probably seen me with this whole setup before. This exact bookshelf was my backdrop for the longest time for my first apartment that I lived in Seattle, and it's now in my bedroom. It's still kind of a work in progress, but as we're gradually getting more settled into the new house and kind of more used to our surroundings and budgeting for buying new furniture, I'm happy to report that probably a good 2/3 of the books have now made it onto bookshelves, which is super awesome. So I'm sitting here on the floor like I used to back in the old days, but with a tripod instead of a chair that my camera is balanced on. Got a seltzer, it's peach, it's 80 degrees outside, unfortunately, on this day, the 1st of November, 2024. I hate climate change so much. This is not going to turn into a rant video about climate change because I feel like I don't know what purpose that would serve specifically, but I will say, like, if you're angry about this the way that I am, find a way to take action. Go vote. It's election season in the United States. And I know that, like, everyone's talking about the presidential election and how important that is. Yes, it is, but I will also add that especially if you're feeling disillusioned with the absolute gridlock that the two-party system has us in the United States, don't forget to vote down ballot. There are so many important questions that we get to vote on for state and local government. Here in Maryland and Baltimore, we got to vote yes on Amendment 1 to our Constitution, which is going to hopefully enshrine reproductive freedom into the state constitution. So obviously that's covering things like abortion access, IVF, just more protections for doctors and people that are seeking the type of reproductive health care that Republicans love to exert their disgusting and petty control over. So, you know, try not to be bitter about this. I'm trying to use my anger as a way to take action and get involved. As far as climate change goes, yes, there is a lot of voting that we can do that can affect that, but also finding ways to mitigate that in our everyday lives is really, really important to me. So, to that end, I also have to point out I early voted, and I love this shirt that I got from a local business. It says, "Be more votes because be more reads," and it's got this little bench. So for those of you who don't know, Baltimore, one of Baltimore's nicknames is the city that reads. Apparently that was something that, like, the mayor or something in the 70s decided should be our new slogan because people were thinking Baltimore was getting kind of shitty. I don't know how much people really liked that and how much it took off, but I really like it. And it is kind of known as a city that, you know, has a strong literary tradition, which we do. And I love that. And I love the way it draws a connection between voting and democracy and reading and education. Clearly, that's very important to me. So this video is going to be kind of a rambly check-in, stuff that I've been enjoying this fall, what I've been thinking about the books that I've been reading recently, and then clearly, you know, a little bit of a political call to action here that we should go vote. Oh, there's also a lot of petitions that are going around regarding different aspects of the Palestinian liberation movement, whether that is petitioning the United States Congress to pass the vote that will put an arms embargo in place against Israel. And then also there's a petition going around, I think in Swedish, that is about getting the Nobel Prize Committee to disinvite Israeli diplomats as a form of, like, cultural sanction to the ceremony. Just basically trying to get them to be consistent with the ways that they have disinvited delegates from Russia, Belarus, and Iran because of their warmongering and anti-democratic behavior. I guess if we think really deeply about this, that means that a lot of people are getting disinvited. But anyway, this is specifically a call to action for the Palestinian liberation movement. So I will put some links in my description box to that, as well as, you know, go find your local polling place, educate yourself on what you're going to vote for down ballot, in addition to, you know, your president choice and your Senate and House choices. If you live in the US, most of my audience does, so that is why this is geared more towards the US. But, you know, I think everybody else watching, at least according to Google Analytics, is living in a country that has some sort of democracy going on. So whatever your, you know, appropriate thing is to do there, please do. All right, so with all of that being said, I want to check in a little bit about some of the books that I have been reading recently. I finished my reread of A Series of Unfortunate Events. That series is just so good. You can see it's like right here on the bookshelf behind me. And I remember really disliking the 13th book when I read it. I think I was a quite young teenager when the book came out, at the tail end of, my being in that target age group for middle grade books. Although, like most truly great middle grade books, Series of Unfortunate Events you can enjoy at any age. And I remember really not liking it because I didn't like how many of the mysteries were left unresolved and unsolved. But I think like reading it again as an adult and kind of having just experienced more of the moral ambiguity of most of the choices that you have to make as an adult in your life, the lack of clear delineation between who is good and who is evil, the recognition that we all make decisions and most people are just this mixed bag of morality. Most people are trying their best, a lot of people are failing. I just found that aspect of the book a lot easier to accept as an adult, even though clearly, as an adult, I'm just like, there's absolutely no way that it was okay that the adults failed the Baudelaires after their parents died. Like, there are a lot of very weak and ineffectual adults that don't have a strong, like, moral compass because they're just ineffectual and incompetent. But then there are just as many that are beginning to try their best even though they fail. And it's really interesting to see how the coming of age of the Baudelaires is one of, we begin to take more agency, or they begin to take more agency over their own lives, but as they do, it kind of sucks them into the true moral grayness of the world and having to make difficult decisions, trying to make just the decisions that you can live with. You're going to do the best that you can in your life, but you are probably going to screw it up because that's just the nature of things. I had a harder time accepting that as a child. As an adult, I don't love it, but I have an easier time accepting that this is what it means to be alive and be a human, and that there are very rarely cut and dry and straightforward answers to our problems. Great series. Definitely recommend it if you haven't read it already. I decided to start Intermetzo by Sally Rooney next. I'm a little over halfway through the book right now. I am not enjoying this book as much as I thought I would. This is, for disclosure, the first and only Sally Rooney book that I've read. Does flies stop buzzing around my head? Oh, hi, puppy. I guess everybody just wants to come in while I'm filming stuff. I've got both of the dogs in the room with me. Anyways, this is the first Sally Rooney book that I've read, and honestly, I find the prose to be... I'm not entirely sure why she made the stylistic choice she did to have it third person, present tense sentence fragments, because she is clearly a very good and very gifted writer. But if you're going to write an entire novel, and this is like a 500-page book in sentence fragments, I think that there needs to be a more compelling stylistic reason for that. I'm not entirely sure why that choice was made for this particular book. Really, the only contrast between two of the point of view characters, Ivan and Peter, is that Peter's fragments are a lot more distracted and frenetic and wild, whereas Ivan's are more measured. And then we also have the point of view chapters from Margaret, but honestly, more than halfway through the book, her point of view chapters have been greatly eclipsed by that of the two male characters. So it does overall come across very unbalanced in terms of the prose. As far as the plot and the structure of the book, it's just so navel-gazy. I'm definitely here for novels of manners where not necessarily a ton of things happen and we're getting very interior lives of the characters being the main focus of the books. That's obviously a great strength of novels. But really, it does come down to a lot of Peter sitting around feeling sorry for himself and falling into this like classic Madonna whore dichotomy with the two women that he is romantically and sexually involved with. And with Ivan, it's just, I don't know. His point of view chapters were better and more like interesting and sophisticated, I think, early on in the book. And now it's just kind of become, we have to be with him for some things to happen, for the plot to advance. So again, not above introspective characters. I think that that can be great, but I don't think that there needs to be quite as many pages of this prose dedicated to it, because it isn't advancing the plot and it's also not really developing the characters much either. Another thing that I kind of dislike about this book, I mean, I don't kind of dislike it, I do dislike it, is the way in which like disability is handled, because one of the main characters was, before the events of the book, in a car accident, and it's left her with some kind of like disabling chronic pain that for some reason has also made her not able to have like penetrative sex anymore. But like that seems to be it aside from the chronic pain. It's just kind of a bizarre addition that they said, you know, oh, like this is the one thing that's off limits for her and she has to deal with this chronic pain. Everything else is fine. Everything else is fair game. The book does not leave a lot to the imagination in terms of the kind of sex the characters have. So I'm really kind of confused by this idea that, you know, this character, years after this breakup that she and Peter have had, they're clearly both still very like sexually and romantically attracted to each other. They're basically living like they are platonic life partners, but there's a whole lot of just ableism, both internalized and then I also think external in the novel itself. That's basically like she's not worthy or able to have this relationship because she can't have this one very specific type of sex. Like she believes that, Peter doesn't believe it, but I think overall the novel is kind of tending towards making her out to be this more virginal and pure character for that reason, as contrasted with Naomi, who's a sex worker who Peter's going to for, I mean, every type of sex, but he's also going to Sylvia for every type of sex except explicitly penetrative. So it is very strange to me that this then falls back on that old trope of the Madonna whore binary. It's weird because reading this book, it's supposed to be, you know, like this modern novel where the characters are very sexually liberated. The book, again, has no problem in like detailing explicitly the kind of sex that the characters have. But the social conventions and the rest of the framing devices all read so Victorian. It really reads like this was written in a Victorian social and cultural context. It reminds me a lot of reading novels like Middlemarch, where the characters are circumscribed from doing the things that they truly want to by the cultural circumstances in which they live. Now, these are not exactly the same cultural circumstances. I know some of this is also down to the way that the characters are raised and the fact that this takes place in Ireland. But at the same time, it just doesn't seem to serve any particular function in advancing the novel to make it essentially a Victorian novel where the characters aren't shy about spitting in each other's mouths. You know what I'm saying? It's very odd. It's very long. I'm gonna finish it, but I really do think that this book would have benefited from being trimmed down, not just because, oh, you know, like all the things that people say, like short attention span, shorter chapters. It's not that I'm against long books. I just think that there is a lot of wasted space in terms of prose that is neither inspiring to read nor serving a particularly useful purpose for the book. So if that sounds harsh, sorry, but that's where I stand on Intermetzo right now. Because I have been tired of taking books around in my bag and getting them all dinged up, I also spent some time crocheting like a little book sleeve out of some scrap yarn that I had. So I made it to fit this book, but this is like probably the biggest book I will wind up taking in a bag. So you just put it in there, made a little like buttonhole thingamabob over it, and that just stops it from getting banged up in my bag. So you were at least good for helping me make my crocheted book sleeve. I'm also making one for Sean. It's kind of in my crochet bag right now, which looks like Kirby because I love the idea that Kirby is just eating yarn that I'm crocheting. I've been enjoying crochet. I've been trying to like get back into my sort of crafting and art making headspace. It's been tough. Like this fall, I'm gonna be honest, like every chronic illness that I have that I'm dealing with has decided to rear its ugly head simultaneously. So I've just been dealing with a lot of pain and exhaustion and fatigue and depression, and it's just, It's been tough. It has not been easy, but crochet was something that I felt was manageable to deal with. And honestly, this project felt good because the time commitment and the overhead was pretty minimal. I actually crocheted this entire thing while watching the World Series, which was another fall thing that of course I have been enjoying, even though I didn't really have much of a rooting interest in either of the teams by the time we got to Dodgers Yankees. I just love watching baseball for the sake of baseball. It's a great sport. This was just a killer series. I felt that it was so full of many dramatic moments, many historic moments that were just super enjoyable. I'm also ecstatic to learn that no sooner does the MLB season end than The Athletic broke the news that we are getting a women's professional baseball league again. Yes, thank goodness. It's coming back in 2026. I read the news on my lunch break at work and I screamed like out loud. It was a good thing that no one was in their room with me because they probably thought that I was like dying of fright or whatever. But I'm so happy. I'm so, so happy. I have been pining for and dreaming for this day. It is so nice to know that we won't have to wait for MLB to drag their feet on things like this. We are just going to get a women's league. I cannot wait. It's going to be so much fun. Please come to Baltimore. Please open with a team that's closer to me than New York. Pretty please. Let's see, speaking of other sports things, because I am now on the topic, I'm also very much looking forward to NWSL playoffs starting this month. The Seattle Reign were eliminated from the playoffs quite some time ago. Regular season's over. We didn't finish dead last, but we finished second to last, which still feels really bad. But I am all in now on Kansas City Current winning the playoffs. One of my really good friends is a Kansas City Current fan, and just for their sake, I'm rooting in all the way. And I just love watching that team play. They are fantastic this season. The fact that they were in the bottom of the table last season also gives me hope that Seattle will be able to turn things around. And once again, I am please begging pro women's soccer to come to the Baltimore area because I need it. I do. I know there's a team in DC, but if you know anything about Seattle Reign and the intricacies of how the sale of the team went down, you'll know why I'm not super high on the Washington Spirit. They've got great players, but I just can't bring myself to root for the team. Let's see. Okay, let's talk about the next book that I have started recently. I have a nonfiction read for you that is called The Book on the Bookshelf by Henry Petrosky. This is a book that I picked up, I think, last fall at a library book sale in Seattle. And, you know, the book on the bookshelf, obviously that's something that the subject matter will just be very interesting to me. But what I didn't realize until I started reading it was that this particular author is a professor of both civil engineering and history at Duke University, or at least he was at the time this book was written. This book was written in 1999, and I have to look up if this guy is like retired or what, because, you know, he looks a little bit older in his author picture, so there's a good chance that he's retired. So it's about the history of the technology that is the bookshelf as a means of organizing books and of being this type of invisible infrastructure that is overshadowed frequently by the things it contains, and discussions about the technology of the book, the technology of writing in the printing press. But he thinks that it is also like worthy of studying the interior architecture that is the bookshelf, and the way that we build and organize things around the bookshelf as this unit of storage. And it's really interesting the way that he posits this as a type of engineering, which I honestly never really thought about before. So I'm 3 chapters into this, not super far, but I have now read chapters, the introductory one, you know, just kind of setting the stage for his argument. And then we've also read some chapters about the ancient world and how we went from the technology of storing books that were written on scrolls, and how that could sometimes be more difficult because you would literally have scrolls that would fall apart because they were getting crushed by the weight of other books written on scrolls being attached on top. And now we've kind of switched over to the technology of the way that bookshelves and carrels existed in medieval monasteries as books and literature in the Western world made the switch from scrolls to codices, the codex, you know, being the unit of book, the unit of book that we have now. So it's interesting. I'm kind of reading it pretty slowly. It is written in a more academic style, so I'm really taking my time and being very intentional with reading these chapters, but I am liking it quite a lot. I would be interested to read the author's other books. He had a book on the history of the pencil, which sounds interesting. I will say the one thing is that that kind of makes this an amusing experience to read is that because it was written in 1999, he does talk about computers and computer science because, you know, being an engineering professor at Duke, he would have had the cutting edge of it, but it's still the cutting edge of computers in 1999. So it's kind of funny the terminology that we used to use back then to talk about computers and the internet reads kind of as quaint by comparison, but it's also delightful because it is nice to be reminded of a time when the internet was still so young and honestly more of a free and less censored place in many ways than it has become now. So that's just worth noting, is that because the book is 25 years old, there is a little bit of that. Let's talk next about some books that I have on my list to read upcoming. I did not get through all of the sort of Halloween and scary books that I wanted to, just because, again, aforementioned chronic illness stuff, reading other things more slowly, reading books that are longer, like Intermetzo, is just taking up like all of my fiction reading time, and it will for a little while because it's 500 pages long. I am hoping to get more read during the weekend. But anyway, here are some books that I have been looking forward to reading that I would really like to get to in the next couple of weeks. I think that's pretty doable. One of them is Bunnicula, which is by Deborah and James Howe and illustrated by Alan Daniel. This is a book that I loved as a kid. I purchased a copy of it online for like a few dollars, honestly, and it was such a amazing story for me to read as a kid. In case you aren't familiar or haven't read it, it's kind of a Dracula type story where there is a family that adopts a little rabbit that has kind of a Dracula fur pattern going on, and the dog and the cat that the family already has start noticing mysterious things happening to the vegetables in the family's refrigerator. How overnight they will be completely drained out of all of their color and their juice, and the rabbit will have these glowing red eyes. I remember this book being kind of a fun, creepy, gothic read as a child. I was very into it. I was very into the way that the cat character, Chester, is very much situated as like a vampire hunter type character, almost like a Van Helsing, but a really cranky house cat. And I just wanted to reread this because I haven't read it since I was a kid. I remember loving it, and it was going to be a good Halloween read. I don't really care that it's November now. I'm going to read it anyway. Speaking of not really caring it's November because I like to be creeped out year round, I also have wanted to reread The Accident Season by Moira Fowley Doyle. I try to reread one of her books of The Accident Season, Spellbook of the Lost and Found, and All the Bad Apples this time of year anyway, just because they are very creepy and gothic and atmospheric, but I don't think that they're like Halloween specific. You don't have to. Maybe this one is, just because it always takes place in October. I've talked about this on my channel before, but basically this is a book, kind of young adulty, but I think you could enjoy it at any age, about this young girl named Kara and her family. Every October they have this sort of family curse where the family starts to suffer from mysterious and very dangerous accidents for the entire month of October. So one year it was the season of year that her father died. Other years it's just that people break arms or stuff in the house gets broken. But it is really a story that is not just about the supernatural element of the accidents, but also the sort of traumatic history of the family, which is the reason why they are revisited by these traumatic accidents around the same time every year. There are some trigger warnings for mentions and discussion of sexual assault and child abuse in this book. I don't think that it went into anything super graphically, but just be aware of that if that's something that you need to put on a TBR or read now. And I really love her writing. These are books that I don't even remember how I found out about, but I bought them all pre-pandemic, I think, at this point, and they're so good. Like, I want to reread them every year. So this is going to be my Moira Fowley Doyle reread for October. Or for November, whatever. I actually did do some looking to see if she's written anything new recently, and it kind of appears not. So I wonder what happened. I wonder if she just is working on something longer or taking a break, or maybe she's switching to writing for adults. I don't know, but I would really like to read a new book from her at some point. In the meanwhile, though, I'm happy to reread The Accident Season. And then last but not least, my next nonfiction book that I will probably read parallel to the history of the bookshelf is Space, Time, and Motion by Sean Carroll. Sean Carroll is a PhD in physics. I believe he is a professor here at Johns Hopkins in Baltimore. And this is part of his new series, The Biggest Ideas in the Universe. So for those of you who don't know, my husband, Sean, is a trained physicist. He did graduate work at CERN and the particle accelerator, and this is, his true love of physics surpasses basically all the other intellectual interests he has, of which there are many. And I kind of got like halfway through an engineering degree, so I have, I think, enough physics to be dangerous. Like, I have the math, I have the calculus to understand a lot of these things, but I don't have the same like technical background, obviously. So Sean Carroll writes physics for an audience that is still knowledgeable about these things and knowledgeable about the math, or at least like willing to sit and take the time to study it to understand these ideas better. But you don't have to have like a master's or a PhD in physics to read them. Sean says that, my husband Sean, not Sean Carroll, my husband Sean says that these are definitely books that I could, handle in terms of the math, and I'm really excited to read them. A lot of my science reading recently has been more focused on the biology and chemistry subjects because I work outdoors in environmental education, and a lot of what I do is reading that I'm hoping is going to inform my teaching that I do there. Because even though I teach, elementary aged kids, I still like to be up on all of my information so that, even if I'm reading this at a higher level, I can still then explain it to younger kids, because they will ask questions. I just don't want to, dump a bunch of calculus on a 5-year-old, maybe when they're like 6, 7, So it is going to be cool getting to get back into reading some physics books, because it's been a little while since I've done that. Like I said, I think I'll read that one concurrently with the book on the bookshelf. So that's kind of my update now on what I've been reading, what I've been enjoying. The other thing I've been loving here, though, is the amount of just fall leaves and beautiful deciduous trees we get here. Washington was definitely more of an evergreen state. Maryland, I think, has slightly more deciduous trees, so even though my backyard is all conifers, I have really been enjoying both at my workplace, which is, an outdoor nature center, and also in my neighborhood, seeing all the trees change, watching the seasons change, watching the way that the animals are different now. It's just been awesome. I'm really fortunate that I get to spend a lot of my day outside. It's something that I really prioritize in my job because I don't want to sit indoors at a desk all day. I want to be out doing things. And going out and enjoying the fall leaves and getting to do experiments with kids out in nature has been super fun. So yeah, that's kind of where I am. At some point in the next couple of weeks, maybe the next month, I would like to make a video about other booktubers that I've been enjoying watching. So if you have somebody that you would like to recommend that I watch, this can be you, this can be somebody else that you like watching. Please do leave me a link to their channel, or at least their channel name, down in the comments, because I feel like BookTube goes through these sort of ebbs and flows of a lot of people joining, and then a lot of people stop posting or drift away or something like that. So I'm kind of at a point now where I have the people that I like watching that have been very consistent posters over the years, and then I've also recently gotten introduced to a bunch more people that have maybe only been making videos for a year or two. So please leave me a recommendation. Let me know what books and other bookish things or non-bookish things you have been enjoying this fall. I hope you're all doing well. I hope you go vote. I hope you go get involved in your communities and go vote down ballot. And I will see you in the next one. Bye.